Today we're going to sew knickers using a cover stitch machine to top stitch very narrow knicker elastic, 5-6mm wide. I'm using 2 needles narrow cover stitching in this video. I'm going to construct the knickers on the overlocker. You can use your domestic sewing machine using a stretch stitch. The fabric here is cotton jersey, 94% cotton, 6% spandex, 200 grams per meter. The edges roll a bit, but it's still relatively manageable. The pattern is quick sew 3881 view D, adapted to fit me. I need to finish the gusset because it's an open gusset, so I'm overlocking one of the edges, the wider edge, and it's done. And the pattern has 3 pieces. So the front, the back, the gusset. Now I'm sewing the side seams. So front and back are put together, right sides together, and we are sewing the side seams. The next step is to put the gusset right side to the wrong side of the back. Make a sandwich, so the back of the pattern is between the gusset and the front, and we are sewing all layers. And it's done. So the gusset is going to be placed to the front. I'm going to sew the bands, so the elastic bands for my waist opening and the leg openings. I put the elastic right sides together, and I'm sewing using a zigzag. It's a narrow zigzag. I'm using a stretch needle, and my needle is 8011, and I think it's Schmetz. We are sewing the shorter edges of our elastic bands, the leg opening bands, and the waistband. Now I'm going to divide all my openings, as always, in halves. You can do it by dividing everything in quarters. I divide my opening and my band in halves and match the halves. So my elastic band is divided in halves, and my waist opening is divided in halves. The halves on the elastic and on the knickers are matching. And I'm going to baste the elastic to the knickers. Right sides of the elastic and the knickers are matching. I'm using a straight stitch. It's a long straight stitch. To go through the bulky seams, I'm helping my machine a bit. I'm sewing as close to the edge as possible, so about 1mm from the edge, but I'm just basting it. And I'm pulling on the elastic all the time. I'm not pulling on the fabric. There is only 10% difference between the elastic and the opening, so it shouldn't be very difficult, but pulling on the elastic helps to distribute it evenly. And this is quite a slow process. This is probably the slowest, the longest process in making these knickers. But I think basting helps. Obviously you can skip this step if you prefer, but I think basting really helps. And my cover stitch is strong enough. I don't really need any extra, but if you are worried that your cover stitching is not strong enough to hold the elastic, you can use a stretch stitch, not a basting stitch, and just leave it. You don't have to remove it then. I'm going to move the camera a bit and show you from a distance how I pull on the elastic, but I'm not pulling on the fabric. I'm kind of helping the feed dogs feed evenly, so the fabric goes straight under the foot. And we're going to do the same to our leg openings. I'm sewing the waist opening at the moment. And obviously if you flip it to the right side, the elastic is going to be visible just by about 3mm. So only the edge of the elastic is going to be showing like that. And this is quite a narrow elastic, so it's 5 or 6 millimeters, I don't remember. Again, I'm dividing my band and my leg opening in halves, and I'm matching the halves. The right side of the elastic is matching the right side of the fabric. And I'm going to baste it, and I'm pulling the elastic but not pulling the fabric, and helping my machine a bit when going through seams or anything bulky. And we need to be extra careful when we are going to sew the gusset, because the gusset can move. We don't want it to move or get twisted. So I'm distributing the elastic by pulling it. Distributing it evenly by pulling it. But I let the feed dogs do their job, so I'm not pulling or pushing or doing anything to the fabric. And I've got my gusset, so I need to be more careful. I know it takes a bit longer than I would like, but take your time. And we've got only one leg opening left. Again, flip to the right side is going to be hardly visible. Only the very, very pretty bit of the elastic is going to be visible. So we are dividing our leg opening in half and our elastic band in half, matching the halves. The right side of the elastic is matching the right side of the fabric. But this is the last one. I'm not a very patient person, so for me this method is probably not the best. But we all like different things. And it's always good to try new techniques and decide whether you like them or not. Yeah, a bit of maintenance. I don't like having fluff when I sew. So again, sew as close as possible to the edge. I'm going through a bulky seam, so I want my seams to match, and I'm helping my machine a little bit. And again, I'm pulling the elastic, not pulling the fabric, making sure that everything is flat. And being extra careful when the gusset needs to lay flat. And I'm using the floating function of my machine. This is a box feed machine. If your machine struggles, use a walking foot, or you can sew through tissue. And always use a stretch needle when you work with stretch fabric. We are nearly there. So everything is basted now. The elastic is basted to the knickers, and we are ready to top stitch it. We are going to top stitch it using the cover stitch, so that when flipped it looks like that. you can only see a bit of the elastic. It's slightly more dainty. And again, I'm using the guides on my foot, but what I like to do, and you don't have to do that, you can put the needles under the elastic, but I want one of my needles to go into the elastic because it's almost the same thickness, so I don't need any compensation. And this is my personal choice. And I'm going to go with one needle in the elastic and one needle under the elastic. And I'm using 2 needles narrow cover stitch, and it's not reverse. So I want the needle stitch to be visible on the right side. And my stitch length is 3.5. You can go lower. So you can go 2.5, 3. Knickers are dainty. I'm just not a very dainty person. If your layers of the fabric and the thickness of your elastic are not similar, this is going to be difficult. So if that is a problem, use both needles on the same number of layers. So go under the elastic. And again, I'm finishing in the round. I will probably need to trim something, but I don't mind that. I might need to trim my seam allowance. It might be visible because it's a narrow stitch. And I'm using rainbow or variegated thread just to show you how it looks like. It might not be the best idea because every tiny mistake is going to show. But it looks like that. And I'm top stitching all the elastic, so all the 3 openings. 2 for the legs and 1 for the waist. And it's quite important that the seam allowance, as small as it is, needs to go down. You don't want it twisted. You don't want it to go up and down because this is going to look really, really ugly. So again, my needles are not precisely on the same amount of fabric, but I don't need any compensation because, as you can see, it's almost the same. The thickness of the elastic and the thickness of my fabric with the seam allowances is so similar that I don't have any skipped stitches or any other problems. But you don't have to do it like that. Yeah, and I can see that there is a little bit of seam allowance that is showing, which means some extra work for me because I will probably need to trim a little bit. But it looks like that. It's top stitched and it sits flat. And it will need to be tidied up a bit. And this is not my favorite method, so I suppose I would get better with practice, but I'm not sure if I'm going to use this method a lot. But it's good to know, and it's good for narrow elastic because, as I said, the elastic is 5 or 6 millimeters, so the seam allowance is tiny. And because I've basted everything, I don't really need to help my machine. It's already distributed evenly, so I don't have to pull or push or do anything. And finishing in the round. And cover stitching is relatively quick. It's only the basting that takes a bit longer, but the basting helps. And it looks like that. Almost done. And the back with my rainbow thread looks like that. I'm going to show you properly. And the finished knickers will look something like that. So only a bit of the elastic is showing. And the back and my rainbow thread is showing. I'm going to show you the wrong side of the knickers as well. I probably need to trim the seam allowances a bit. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more.